My name is Amber Mitchell, and at 28, I discovered my parents had orchestrated the biggest betrayal of my life. I had sacrificed 3 months of career opportunities to restore my grandmother Eleanor's house, what they called an urgent family project. The dust had barely settled on the freshly finished hardwood floors when I overheard them in the kitchen. I stared at my parents in disbelief, their words echoing in my ears, "We just wanted to keep you busy." Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear how I turned my parents' betrayal into the biggest blessing of my life. I had always been the perfect daughter. Growing up in suburban Chicago with Richard and Karen Mitchell as parents meant perfection wasn't just encouraged, it was expected. My father, a corporate attorney with an impressive corner office downtown, and my mother, a hospital administrator who ran her household with the same efficiency as her medical staff, had my life planned before I could even speak. Medical school was their dream for me. So when I announced my decision to pursue architectural design instead, the temperature in our home dropped several degrees. "It's just not a reliable career path, Amber," my father would say, reviewing my college applications. "There's no stability in creative fields." My mother would nod in agreement, adding, "We just want what's best for you, honey." Despite their disapproval, I graduated at the top of my class and secured a position at Wilson & Hayes, one of Chicago's most competitive architectural design firms. 4 years in, I was being considered for senior designer, a promotion that would finally prove to my parents that my chosen path had merit. The only person who ever truly supported my creative aspirations was my grandmother Eleanor. While my parents saw impracticality in my detailed sketchbooks, Grandma Eleanor saw vision. Her Victorian farmhouse 2 hours outside Chicago was my childhood sanctuary. The wraparound porch where she taught me to draw. The attic where I designed my first floor plan at 12. The kitchen where she told me, "Create spaces that tell stories, Amber. That's what makes a house a home." When she passed away 6 months ago, I felt like I'd lost my only ally. The funeral was solemn and brief. My parents had never quite approved of Grandma Eleanor's impractical sentimentality either. They mentioned something about eventually selling her property but seemed in no rush to handle her estate. That changed 3 months ago with a frantic Sunday night call. "Amber, we need your help," my mother's voice was uncharacteristically urgent. "The real estate agent says your grandmother's house needs significant repairs before it can be listed. The roof is leaking, there's potential structural damage, and the whole place needs updating. Can't we hire contractors?" I asked, already calculating the impact an absence would have on my pending promotion. "We've tried," my father interjected. "Given the rural location, nobody reputable is available for months. The property is deteriorating by the day. We need someone who understands construction and design to oversee the project. But I have the Henderson project presentation next week, and the quarterly review after that," I explained, anxiety building in my chest. "This is family, Amber," my mother said in that tone that brooked no argument. "Your grandmother would have wanted you to help preserve her home. That was the trump card. Grandma Eleanor would have wanted me to help, they knew I couldn't refuse when they invoked her memory." The conversation with my boss the next day was excruciating. 3 months? Marcus raised his eyebrows. "You understand the Henderson project would be reassigned. And there's the promotion committee meeting in July." "It's a family emergency," I explained, the words tasting bitter. "My grandmother's house." "I understand," Marcus said, though his expression suggested otherwise. "Family comes first. We'll discuss your projects when you return." The unspoken message was clear, there would be consequences. When I arrived at Grandma Eleanor's house that weekend, dragging 2 suitcases and a bag of design supplies, I felt the first stirring of doubt. The property wasn't in the dire condition my parents had described. Yes, there was a small water stain on the dining room ceiling, and the paint was peeling in places, but deteriorating by the day seemed dramatically overstated. Still, I felt a wave of nostalgia walking through those familiar rooms. The house was built in 1898, with original hardwood floors, intricate millwork, and stained glass transoms that cast rainbow patterns across the walls in late afternoon sun. It needed work, certainly, but there was solid craftsmanship beneath the neglect. I spent that first afternoon making detailed notes and sketches. I envisioned restored woodwork, updated fixtures that complemented the historical elements, and fresh color schemes that would honor the home's character while appealing to modern buyers. If I was sacrificing 3 months of my career, I was determined to make this renovation something that would make Grandma Eleanor proud. My parents called that evening, asking for updates with unusual interest. "I think I can have most of it done in 2 months if I work efficiently," I told them. "No need to rush," my father said. "Better to be thorough. The market timing works better for a late summer sale anyway." I thought it strange, they had been so insistent about urgency before, but I was already planning my attack on the water-damaged section of roof and didn't question it. "The real estate agent mentioned developers have shown interest," my mother added. "Apparently the large lot is appealing for a potential subdivision." That gave me pause. "Subdivision? You mean tearing down the house?" "We have to be practical, Amber," my father replied. "The house is old. Most buyers will see more value in the land." I felt a pang of grief imagining Grandma Eleanor's beloved home demolished for cookie-cutter housing. But I reminded myself it wasn't my decision to make. I was just here to prepare it for sale, whatever that might ultimately mean. As I unpacked in my childhood bedroom that night, running my fingers along the window seat where I'd spent countless hours sketching and dreaming, I pushed down my reservations and focused on the task ahead. This project would be my tribute to Grandma Eleanor, even if the result wasn't what she would have wanted. I couldn't have known then that my parents' unusual urgency, their sudden dismissal of time constraints, and their casual mention of developers were the first threads in a web of deception that would unravel my entire understanding of family loyalty. My first week working on Eleanor's house was filled with nostalgic enthusiasm. Each morning I woke with the sunrise, coffee mug in hand, creating detailed to-do lists while sitting on the porch swing where Grandma and I had shared so many conversations. Despite the circumstances, there was something healing about pouring my professional skills into this beloved space. I started with the roof, hiring a local contractor to replace the damaged section rather than attempting that repair myself. While he worked, I cleared out gutters clogged with years of maple leaves and pine needles. The house seemed to breathe easier with each small improvement. Inside, I focused first on the kitchen, Grandma's favorite room. I stripped 7 decades of wallpaper, revealing layers of history, 1950s boomerangs, 1970s harvest gold florals, and finally, 1990s country blue checks that I remembered from childhood visits. Beneath it all, the plaster walls needed significant repair, but they were salvageable. The original glass-fronted cabinets had good bones, needing only careful sanding and refinishing. I was removing the dated laminate countertops when I met Noah Campbell, the local handyman my parents had occasionally hired for odd jobs around the property. "You're Eleanor's granddaughter," he said, not a question but a statement as he arrived to help with the plumbing work. Around my age, with work-worn hands and observant eyes, Noah moved through the house with the familiarity of someone who respected its history. "Your grandmother was proud of you," he mentioned casually while installing the farmhouse sink I'd selected. "Always showing me magazine clippings of buildings you'd worked on." That evening, my parents called to check on my progress. I eagerly shared my vision for preserving the kitchen's vintage charm while making it attractive to modern buyers: restoration glass for the cabinet doors, marble countertops that echoed the original materials, fixtures that honored the home's era. "That sounds unnecessarily expensive," my father said. "The developers will just gut it anyway." "But what if we find a buyer who appreciates the historical elements?" I countered. "This house has architectural significance." "Amber, honey, we need to be practical," my mother sighed. "Neutral colors, basic fixtures. Nothing fancy. The house just needs to be presentable for listing photos." Their dismissal stung. This wasn't just any renovation project, this was Grandma Eleanor's home, filled with a century of history and craftsmanship rarely seen in modern construction. The next day, Noah arrived with local pine for the kitchen trim. When I mentioned my parents' insistence on basic updates, he frowned. "Seems a shame," he said. Houses like this are disappearing. The developers who've been buying around here put up those cheaply built 4-bedroom colonials. All identical. You know about the developers? I asked. Riverwood Properties. They've been buying up old farms and historic properties throughout the county. They approached your grandmother multiple times, but she always refused to sell. This was news to me. My parents never mentioned that. Noah shrugged. Eleanor was pretty set against it. Said this place deserved better than to be bulldozed for profits. That afternoon, I discovered exactly what the developers planned. A quick internet search revealed Riverwood's portfolio: historic properties demolished to make way for cookie-cutter luxury homes. Their website even had a concept drawing for Mitchell Meadows, a proposed subdivision of 12 homes on what was unmistakably my grandmother's property. The drawing showed no trace of the Victorian farmhouse that had stood for over a century. When I called my parents that evening, I couldn't keep the accusation from my voice. You never mentioned that Grandma refused to sell to Riverwood. A pause on the line. That was Eleanor's decision to make while she was alive, my father finally replied. Now we need to be sensible about the estate. So you're going to disregard her wishes completely? This house meant everything to her. Don't be dramatic, Amber, my mother interjected. It's a house, not a person. Eleanor is gone, and sentimentality won't pay property taxes. That night, I missed an important project presentation at work. My colleague Rebecca texted afterward, "Went well, but Marcus asked where you were. Team missed your input." I felt the first real twinge of doubt about the urgency of this renovation. Something wasn't adding up. Why the emergency call about immediate repairs, followed by assurances there was no rush? Why hadn't my parents mentioned Grandma's refusal to sell to developers? Why did the house seem far less deteriorated than they'd described? The next day, I ventured into the attic to assess the insulation. In the far corner, behind a stack of old suitcases, I discovered a wooden chest I'd never seen before. Inside were bundles of letters tied with faded ribbon, all in my grandmother's distinctive handwriting. Most were addressed to various family members, some never sent. I took them downstairs, feeling like a trespasser but drawn to this unexpected connection to Eleanor. Reading through the first bundle that evening, I discovered Grandma's private thoughts about the house, the land, and her hopes for its future. "This place has sheltered 4 generations of our family," she wrote in one unsent letter to my father. "It deserves to be loved, not liquidated for profit." Despite my growing suspicions, I recommitted myself to honoring Grandma Eleanor's memory through this renovation. If the house was going to be sold, I would at least ensure it was presented in a way that showcased its true value. Perhaps the right buyer, someone who appreciated its history and craftsmanship, would save it from the developer's wrecking ball. With renewed determination, I threw myself into the work, trying to ignore the unsettling feeling that I wasn't being told the whole truth about this urgent family project. 1 month into the renovation, the physical transformation of Eleanor's house was taking shape, but so were my frustrations. I had established a rhythm: mornings for heavy work, scraping, sanding, painting, afternoons for more detailed tasks like restoring the original window latches and doorknobs. Each evening, I collapsed into exhaustion only to start again at dawn. The original floors, hidden under decades of carpet and linoleum, had emerged as one of the home's finest features after days of careful restoration. The living room's oak planks now glowed with warm amber tones, while the library's herringbone pattern added unexpected sophistication. These weren't the kinds of details appreciated by developers who planned to demolish. Noah had become a regular presence, handling electrical updates and helping with the 2-person jobs. Unlike most contractors I'd worked with professionally, he approached each task with reverence for the house's history. "These newel posts are irreplaceable," he commented one morning, carefully stripping paint from the ornate staircase. "Old-growth walnut. You can't buy this quality of wood anymore." "My parents don't seem to care," I replied, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Noah was quiet for a moment. "Your grandmother cared. Said this house was meant to stand another 100 years. Our conversations frequently drifted to the property's history and Eleanor's love for it. I found myself looking forward to his arrival each day, not just for the extra hands but for someone who understood what was being lost. Mrs. Sullivan, the elderly neighbor who had been friends with Grandma Eleanor for decades, began stopping by with lemonade and town gossip. During one of her visits, she watched me restoring the built-in dining room cabinets. "All this work," she commented, "and your parents in such a rush to sell. Seems peculiar." I paused, sandpaper in hand. "They said the house needed immediate attention before listing." Mrs. Sullivan's eyebrows rose. "Is that so?" Curious, since Eleanor kept this place in fine condition. Always had things fixed promptly. "Well, they mentioned a pending sale." "To those Riverwood people?" She made a dismissive noise. "They've been sniffing around for years. But last I heard, they're tied up with that development over in Fairview. Won't be ready for new acquisitions until next year at the earliest." That evening, I received another discouraging call from work. Rebecca, my colleague who had covered my projects in my absence, was being considered for the senior designer position I had been in line for. "Marcus mentioned your extended leave shows questionable commitment," she said apologetically. "I'm sorry, Amber." After the call, I confronted my parents about the timeline discrepancy. "Mrs. Sullivan says Riverwood won't be ready to develop for at least 6 months. Why did I need to drop everything to work on the house immediately?" My father cleared his throat. "The real estate market is unpredictable. Better to be prepared early than miss an opportunity." "And what about my opportunity? The promotion I was in line for?" "I left work because you said this was urgent." "Family responsibilities sometimes require sacrifice," my mother replied with familiar finality. "Your grandmother would have appreciated your dedication." Their continued invocation of Eleanor's memory felt increasingly manipulative. That night, I returned to her letters, finding one addressed to me but never sent, dated just months before her death. "My dearest Amber," she had written, "I've always admired your courage to forge your own path despite pressure to conform to others' expectations. This house has weathered many storms because it was built with integrity and purpose, qualities you possess in abundance. I hope someday you'll understand why this place matters beyond its market value." The letter brought tears but also deepened my confusion. If Eleanor had wanted me to understand the house's importance, why hadn't she discussed its future with me while she was alive? The next day, while searching for the property deed to verify boundary lines, I discovered real estate documents in my parents' briefcase, left carelessly in the study. Among them was correspondence with Riverwood Properties confirming they wouldn't be ready to proceed with Mitchell Meadows for at least 8 months, with the earliest groundbreaking planned for spring of next year. My parents had known there was no urgency. They had deliberately exaggerated the house's condition and the timeline, knowing I would sacrifice my own opportunities out of family duty. But why? What possible motivation could they have for keeping me here, away from my career, working on a house that didn't need emergency renovation? That evening, I attempted to set boundaries for the first time in our relationship. "I've seen the Riverwood documents," I told them over the phone. "I know there's no pending sale. I'm setting an end date, 2 more weeks, and then I'm returning to Chicago." A heavy silence followed. "After all we've done for you," my mother finally said, her voice tight with disapproval. "This is about family obligation, Amber. Your grandmother—" "Stop using Grandma Eleanor to manipulate me," I interrupted, surprising even myself with my firmness. "She would never have wanted me to sacrifice my career for unnecessary house repairs." After hanging up, I sat in the half-finished kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of a month's worth of work, and broke down. Tears splashed onto the marble countertop I'd carefully selected to honor the home's character my parents had no intention of preserving. For a moment, I considered packing my bags and leaving immediately. But something kept me there. A combination of stubborn determination to finish what I'd started and a nagging sense that there was more to uncover about this situation. Little did I know, the true betrayal was far deeper than I had imagined. By the 2-month mark, Eleanor's house had undergone a remarkable transformation. The exterior siding had been repaired and painted a historical sage green with cream trim that highlighted the ornate Victorian details. Inside, the renovated kitchen maintained its vintage charm while incorporating modern conveniences. The bathrooms had been updated with hexagon tile floors and pedestal sinks that honored the home's era. Each room had been carefully restored rather than merely repaired, a distinction my parents seemed unable to appreciate. "The before and after photos are stunning," Noah commented one afternoon as we installed the restored original pendants in the dining room. "You brought this place back to life." His appreciation was a welcome contrast to my parents' persistent focus on practical updates. Over weeks of working side by side, Noah had become not just a helper but a friend who understood my growing attachment to the property. "Have you ever thought about historical designation?" he asked. "This house has the age and architectural significance to qualify." The idea had never occurred to me. The following day, I invited Noah to introduce me to the local historical society. Diana Layton, the society's enthusiastic director, toured the house with growing excitement. "This is one of the best preserved examples of Queen Anne architecture in the county," she explained, pointing out details I'd painstakingly restored. "The original millwork alone makes it significant, but the provenance adds another layer of importance." "Provenance?" I questioned. Diana looked surprised. "You didn't know? Your grandmother's house was built by Franklin Mitchell, who designed several significant buildings throughout the state. It's one of only 3 residential properties he completed in this architectural style. We've wanted to document it for years, but Eleanor was intensely private." This revelation made the prospect of demolition even more tragic. A house with both architectural and historical significance deserved preservation, not destruction. That evening, I returned to Eleanor's letters, searching for mentions of the house's history. In a bundle I hadn't yet read, I discovered correspondence between my grandmother and my parents from years earlier. "Richard and Karen," one letter began, "I understand your concern about the property's maintenance costs, but I cannot agree to sell to developers who plan to demolish a house with such historical and personal significance. This discussion is closed." Another letter, dated several years later, was more pointed. "Your persistent attempts to convince me to sell feel disrespectful of my wishes. This house will remain intact as long as I have any say in the matter." The letters revealed a long-standing conflict I'd known nothing about. My parents had been pressuring Eleanor to sell for years before her death. Their current rush to offload the property to developers wasn't a practical response to her passing, it was the culmination of a goal they'd pursued while she was alive. The next day, I encountered Mrs. Sullivan while working in the front garden. Her casual comment shattered the remaining pieces of the puzzle. "Your grandmother would be so pleased to see you continuing her fight," she said, admiring the restored porch railing. "Her fight?" Mrs. Sullivan looked confused. "Against your parents' attempts to sell, of course. Eleanor told me all about their pressure tactics over the years. She was determined to preserve this place as part of her legacy to you, her only grandchild who understood its value." I nearly dropped my gardening shears. "She wanted me to have the house? Why else would she have left it specifically to you in her will? She was quite clear about her intentions." My blood ran cold. "Mrs. Sullivan, I was told the house was part of the general estate. My parents said they were handling the sale as executors." The elderly woman's expression shifted to alarm. "That's not right, dear. Eleanor made changes to her will last year. This property was left directly to you, separate from the rest of the estate. She told me she wanted to ensure it would be protected." The betrayal was dizzying. If what Mrs. Sullivan said was true, my parents had deliberately concealed my inheritance, manipulated me into taking leave from my job, and planned to profit from selling property that legally belonged to me. That evening, I received a troubling call from my company's HR department. I was being placed on a performance improvement plan due to my extended absence. My promotion opportunity was officially given to Rebecca, and my position was in jeopardy. As I processed this devastating career news, Noah arrived with historical documentation he'd gathered from the county records office. We spread the papers across the dining room table, but I was too distracted by my conversation with Mrs. Sullivan to focus. "Noah, did you know my grandmother left this house to me specifically?" He hesitated. "I'd heard rumors. Eleanor mentioned changing her will last year, but I didn't know the details." "My parents never told me," I said, my voice hollow. "They've been acting as if they have full authority to sell." Noah suggested the house could have greater potential than either demolition or conventional resale. "With historical significance and your design background, this place could be reimagined. A bed and breakfast, a design studio, an artist's retreat." His words planted a seed of possibility, but first, I needed to understand the full extent of my parents' deception. That seed germinated faster than expected. Later that evening, my parents arrived unannounced to check on my progress. They left their cell phones on the kitchen counter while we toured the renovations. When a text notification illuminated my father's screen, I glimpsed a message from their lawyer: "Mitchell property sale cannot proceed without Amber's signature as legal owner under Eleanor's final will." The confirmation of Mrs. Sullivan's claim hit me like a physical blow. When my parents stepped onto the porch to discuss something privately, I moved closer to the kitchen window, their voices carrying clearly through the open window. "She needs to finish the renovations before we tell her," my father was saying. "The property value has already increased with the work she's done." "But she's talking about returning to Chicago," my mother replied. "We need to keep her busy here until the New York situation passes. The design firm will have filled the position by August. Once that opportunity is gone, she'll be more receptive to our suggestions about selling. She'll have less reason to rush back." It was fortunate we intercepted that offer letter. New York would have taken her even further from the practical career path we've encouraged. Their words struck like physical blows. An offer letter? New York? The pieces suddenly aligned with sickening clarity. The real reason for this elaborate deception wasn't just about selling Grandma's house, it was about preventing me from accepting a job offer I'd never even known I received. I stepped into the doorway, my entire body trembling. "You intercepted a job offer meant for me?" They turned, startled by my presence. My father recovered first, his expression shifting from surprise to practiced reasonableness. "Amber, you don't understand the full picture." "Then explain it to me," I demanded, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Explain why you lied about needing emergency renovations. Explain why you concealed that Grandma left me this house. Explain why you hid a job offer addressed to me." Their explanations came in a rush of justifications. The New York position wasn't right for me, the house would be a financial burden, they were protecting me from bad decisions. The familiar pattern of controlling my choices under the guise of parental concern. Then my mother delivered the final blow, the words that would forever change our relationship: "We just wanted to keep you busy while better opportunities aligned with our vision for your future." 3 months of my life. My promotion prospects. A career opportunity I'd never even known about. All sacrificed to my parents' determination to control my path. The renovation project wasn't about honoring Eleanor's memory or preparing her beloved home for sale, it was a deliberate distraction designed to derail my career independence. Standing in the home that was legally mine, surrounded by the evidence of my parents' breathtaking betrayal, I realized I had reached a breaking point. The perfect daughter, the endless people-pleaser, the family peacekeeper, those versions of Amber Mitchell died in that moment, giving way to something new, a woman finally ready to claim her own life. After my parents left, their departure marked by my father's stern warning to think carefully about family obligations before making any rash decisions, I experienced a complete emotional collapse. The weight of their betrayal crushed my chest until breathing became a conscious effort. I paced through the house, a house that was apparently mine, touching the walls and surfaces I'd so carefully restored, feeling like a stranger in a space that legally belonged to me. My mind replayed every manipulation, every half-truth, every outright lie they had told to keep me tethered to their expectations. The urgent call about repairs. The dismissal of my career concerns. The continuous invocation of family duty and Eleanor's memory to ensure my compliance. And beneath it all, the stunning revelation of an intercepted job offer, a New York position I'd never even known I was being considered for. What kind of parents would deliberately sabotage their daughter's career advancement? Mine would. They always had. The realization sparked a flood of memories, my parents misplacing art school brochures in high school, scheduling family events that conflicted with design competitions, expressing constant skepticism about my chosen field. Their manipulation hadn't begun with Eleanor's house, it had been a consistent pattern throughout my life, only now executed on a scale so breathtaking I couldn't rationalize it away. I made a frantic call to Marcus at Wilson and Hayes, my voice shaking as I attempted to explain the situation without sounding unhinged. I've recently discovered my parents intercepted a job offer, something about a position in New York. I never received any communication about this. Marcus's hesitation spoke volumes. Amber, Hamilton Design Group contacted me as a reference 3 months ago. When I didn't hear anything from you about it, I assumed you'd declined their offer. Hamilton Design Group? The prestigious New York firm was known for innovative urban renewal projects, exactly the direction I'd hoped to take my career. They made me an offer? According to Josh Hamilton, they sent an offer letter in April. When they didn't receive a response, they eventually filled the position. I'm sorry, Amber. I thought you knew. The timing aligned perfectly with my parents' sudden insistence that Eleanor's house needed immediate attention, a carefully orchestrated distraction to ensure I'd miss the opportunity. After hanging up, I wandered through the house in a daze, eventually collapsing in Eleanor's reading chair as night fell. The house creaked and settled around me, filled with memories of the grandmother who had tried to protect me from exactly this type of manipulation. Noah found me there the next morning, still in yesterday's clothes, surrounded by Eleanor's scattered letters. I tried calling, he said, concern evident in his voice. When you didn't answer. They lied about everything, I told him, my voice raw from crying. The house is legally mine. They had a job offer that could have changed my career trajectory. 3 months of my life wasted on a renovation project designed solely to keep me from accepting a position they disapproved of. Noah listened without interruption as I detailed the extent of the deception. When I finished, he simply asked, "What do you want to do now?" The question was so direct, so focused on my desires rather than others' expectations, that it momentarily stunned me. What did I want? After decades of trying to balance my own ambitions against my parents' approval, the question felt almost foreign. I want to scream, I admitted. I want to undo the last 3 months. I want to accept that New York offer. I want. My voice trailed off as I stared at the half-finished living room, the space I'd poured my heart and skills into despite believing it would soon be demolished. I want to destroy something, I finally said. Noah watched quietly as I grabbed a hammer from my toolbox and approached the decorative wainscoting I'd spent days carefully restoring. I raised the hammer, hands shaking with rage and grief. It's not fair, I choked out. All that work. All that sacrifice. For nothing. The first blow connected with the polished wood, leaving a deep gouge in the surface I'd meticulously sanded and refinished. The destruction felt momentarily satisfying, a physical outlet for the betrayal burning inside me. I raised the hammer again. Noah's hand gently caught my wrist. Don't let them take this from you too. Take what? My time? My career? My autonomy? They've already taken everything. Not this house, he said quietly. Not your grandmother's legacy. Not the work you've poured into this place. If you destroy what you've created here, they win twice. His words penetrated my rage. The house, this beautiful, historical home that Eleanor had fought to protect, was collateral damage in my battle with my parents. In my pain, I was about to continue what they had started, the destruction of something valuable my grandmother had tried to preserve. I don't even know if I want this house, I confessed, lowering the hammer. I have had a life in Chicago. An apartment, a career. What am I supposed to do with a century-old Victorian in the middle of nowhere? You don't have to decide tonight, Noah replied. But whatever you choose should be your decision, not a reaction to their manipulation. I sank to the floor, exhausted beyond words. I don't know who I am outside of their expectations anymore. The perfect daughter. The responsible one. The one who sacrifices her own dreams to meet family obligations. Noah sat beside me, his shoulder a steady presence against mine. Maybe that's what this house is really about. A chance to discover who Amber Mitchell is when she's not trying to please Richard and Karen. As night fell for the second time since my world had imploded, I slept in Eleanor's reading chair, surrounded by her letters and journals, physically and emotionally drained. In my dreams, I wandered through the house as it had been in my childhood, hearing Eleanor's voice reading passages from her journals about her own struggles for independence. I woke at dawn with tear-stained cheeks and a strange sense of clarity. I had hit rock bottom, my career compromised, my family relationships fractured, my future uncertain. But in that lowest moment, something unexpected had happened. For the first time in my adult life, I had no one to please but myself. What rose from the ashes of that realization wasn't immediate happiness or resolution, but something more valuable, the first genuine sense of possibility I'd felt since arriving at Eleanor's house 3 months ago. Not possibility shaped by others' expectations, but the wide-open potential of a life directed by my own choices. The morning after my breakdown marked a subtle but profound shift. I woke before sunrise, made coffee in the kitchen I'd renovated with my own hands, and stepped onto the wraparound porch as golden light crept across the fields surrounding Eleanor's house. My house. The property looked different somehow, not just because of the renovations I'd completed, but because I was seeing it through new eyes. Not as an obligation or a distraction, but as something that was wholly mine to claim or release as I chose. Time to get some answers, I murmured to myself, dialing a number Noah had provided. Patricia Winters, a local attorney specializing in estate law, agreed to see me that morning. Her small office above the town's hardware store was crammed with filing cabinets and law books, but her attention was sharp and focused as I explained my situation. I'd like to see my grandmother's will, I concluded. The actual document, not my parents' interpretation of it. Within 30 minutes of reviewing Eleanor's final testament, the legal reality was undeniable. The Victorian farmhouse, including all 5 acres of surrounding land, had been left explicitly to me as a separate bequest from the general estate. The language is quite clear, Patricia confirmed. Your grandmother wanted you to have the property outright, with no conditions or obligations to sell. Your parents, as executors, were legally required to inform you of this specific inheritance. And they had no right to negotiate its sale? None whatsoever. Any agreement with developers would be invalid without your signature. In fact, she added, reviewing another page, their failure to disclose this inheritance to you could potentially constitute executor misconduct. The confirmation simultaneously validated my anger and offered an unexpected freedom. My parents' careful manipulation had no legal foundation. They had been operating on the assumption that I would continue to comply with their wishes without questioning their authority. As I left Patricia's office, I felt lighter, the weight of obligation partially lifted by the simple truth of my legal standing. On the drive back to the house, I rehearsed what I would say to my parents, imagining their defensive responses and preparing counterarguments. They answered my video call with practiced smiles that faltered when they saw my expression. I've seen the will, I stated, cutting off my father's attempt at casual conversation. I know the house is legally mine, and I know you had no authority to arrange its sale. The screen captured their momentary panic before my father shifted to his attorney persona. Amber, we were simply managing the process until renovations were complete. Of course we intended to involve you in the final decision. Like you involved me in the decision about the job offer from Hamilton Design Group? I countered. The offer you intercepted and hid from me? We were protecting you, my mother interjected. New York is expensive, dangerous. That position would have taken you further from practical career considerations. Stop. My voice was quiet but firm. I'm 28 years old. You don't get to decide what's practical for my career or my life anymore. The conversation continued in circles of justification and boundary setting, but by its end, I had established clear terms. They would provide all documentation related to Eleanor's estate, cease any communication with developers regarding the property, and acknowledge my full authority to determine its future. And one more thing, I added before disconnecting. I need space to process this betrayal. Don't call me. I'll contact you when, if, I'm ready to talk again. The silence after ending the call was profound. For the first time in my adult life, I had directly opposed my parents' wishes without apologizing or compromising. The boundaries felt both terrifying and exhilarating. That afternoon, I called Marcus at Wilson and Hayes. After explaining the full situation, including my discovery about the intercepted job offer, I proposed a solution. I understand I've jeopardized my position with my extended absence, I acknowledged. But I'm a valuable designer with a proven track record. Would you consider a part-time, remote arrangement while I sort out this property situation? I could handle smaller projects virtually, coming to Chicago for important client meetings. To my surprise, Marcus was receptive. The Henderson project could actually use your input, even remotely. Let me discuss this with the partners and get back to you. While waiting for his response, I met with Noah to discuss the house's potential. His suggestion about alternate uses for the property had planted a seed that was beginning to germinate. The Historical Society is very interested in documenting the house, he explained as we walked the property boundaries. With its architectural significance, you might qualify for preservation grants. I've been thinking about converting part of it into a design studio, I admitted. The light in the sunroom is perfect for drafting, and the library could showcase historical architectural elements. You're thinking of staying? Noah asked, surprise evident in his voice. Not necessarily full-time. But I'm considering options that don't involve either selling to developers or returning to my exact old life. That evening, I reached out to college friends I'd lost touch with during my years of career focus. Emma, who had started her own interior design business, and Jason, who specialized in sustainable building practices, responded with immediate interest in my situation. A historical property with original details intact? That's a unicorn, Emma texted. There's a huge market for authentically restored spaces with modern functionality. Jason added, if you got historical designation, there are tax benefits and grant opportunities. Plus, the sustainable renovation angle could make for amazing portfolio content. As possibilities expanded in my mind, I discovered the final piece of Eleanor's legacy, a collection of detailed journals hidden behind a loose baseboard in her bedroom, a secret compartment I'd uncovered while replacing damaged woodwork. The journals chronicled my grandmother's own professional struggles in the 1960s, when she had abandoned a promising career in landscape architecture to meet family expectations of becoming a full-time homemaker. I wonder if Richard's determination to push Amber toward practical careers stems from his witnessing my own professional disappointments, she wrote in one entry. The painful irony is that my regrets come not from choosing the creative path, but from abandoning it to meet others' expectations. The parallel between her life choices and my current crossroads was startling. Eleanor had sacrificed her professional ambitions to family pressure and spent decades regretting that decision. Now she had given me both the physical means, the house, and the philosophical guidance, her journals, to avoid making the same mistake. The next morning, Marcus called with approval for my part-time arrangement, beginning immediately with remote work on a boutique hotel redesign. That same afternoon, I received encouraging feedback from the Historical Society about grant possibilities for preservation. That evening, sitting on the porch swing as sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, I experienced a feeling I hadn't felt since arriving at Eleanor's house, excitement about the future. Not the anxious determination to complete a task and return to my real life, but genuine anticipation for possibilities I hadn't previously imagined. On an impulse, I called Hamilton Design Group in New York, not expecting to reach anyone important. To my surprise, Josh Hamilton himself answered. I remember your portfolio well, Ms. Mitchell, he said after I explained who I was. We were disappointed when you didn't respond to our offer. There was a family situation that prevented me from receiving your communication, I explained carefully. I've only recently discovered the opportunity existed at all. Well, timing is interesting, Josh replied. We're expanding our historical preservation division and looking for someone with both modern design sensibilities and appreciation for architectural heritage. Your work on the Westbrook Library renovation caught our attention specifically. Are you saying there might still be a position available? My heart raced with unexpected hope. I'm saying it would be worth having a conversation. We're looking for someone who could split time between New York projects and remote work. Would that arrangement interest you? As I hung up, promising to send an updated portfolio immediately, I realized I was smiling, really smiling, for the first time in months. The path forward wasn't yet clear, but it was undeniably mine to determine. I wasn't choosing between my parents' vision for my life and complete rebellion. I was creating a third option that honored both my professional ambitions and Eleanor's legacy. The betrayal that had brought me to rock bottom had also, unexpectedly, created the conditions for a new beginning, one where I finally had the courage to claim my own life. The final month at Eleanor's house, my house, was transformed by purpose. Each renovation task was no longer about preparing the property for someone else's vision, but about shaping a space that could serve my own emerging plans. The remaining projects took on new meaning, restoring the sunroom's wall of windows to create the perfect natural light for a design workspace, converting the formal dining room into a conference area where I could host clients, preserving Eleanor's library as a showcase of historical architectural elements. Noah continued to help, now joined occasionally by local craftspeople who heard about the historical restoration project and volunteered their specialized skills. Mrs. Sullivan's grandson, a master carpenter, restored the intricate fretwork on the front porch that 3 generations of Mitchell women had enjoyed. The retired high school art teacher helped restore the stained glass transom windows to their original glory. It's becoming a community project, Noah observed one evening as we admired the day's progress. People around here have watched this house for generations. They're invested in seeing it preserved. My remote work arrangement with Wilson and Hayes had begun successfully. The boutique hotel project benefited from my deepened understanding of historical renovation, and Marcus seemed impressed with my fresh perspective. My professional confidence, so badly shaken by my parents' manipulation, began to rebuild itself. The client loves your lobby redesign concept, he told me during a video conference. Your work has a new dimension to it, more authentic integration of historical elements with contemporary function. My online design portfolio, freshly updated with before and after photos of Eleanor's house, attracted unexpected attention. A local business owner commissioned me to redesign her shop in the historic downtown district. A couple renovating another century-old home in the county sought my consultation. Quietly, steadily, a foundation for a different kind of design practice was taking shape. The most significant professional development came 3 weeks after my initial conversation with Hamilton Design Group. Following a comprehensive portfolio review and several video interviews, they offered me a position as a preservation design specialist, a role that would allow me to split my time between New York projects and remote work. We're particularly interested in your current project, Josh Hamilton explained. Documenting the restoration of a historically significant private residence aligns perfectly with our firm's new direction. For the first time, my personal connection to Eleanor's house became a professional asset rather than a distraction from my career. The division between family obligation and professional advancement, a false dichotomy my parents had reinforced throughout my life, began to dissolve. Meanwhile, my parents made several attempts to reassert control. First came guilt-laden messages about family loyalty. When those went unanswered, they shifted to practical concerns about property taxes and maintenance costs. Finally, they arrived unannounced one Saturday afternoon, their luxury SUV looking out of place in the gravel driveway. "We've been worried sick," my mother said as I met them on the porch, not inviting them inside. "You've barely communicated for weeks." "I told you I needed space," I replied, maintaining a calm I wouldn't have thought possible a month earlier. "And I meant it." My father surveyed the property, noticing the historical society members documenting original architectural features in the garden. "What's all this? Are you actually planning to keep this white elephant of a house?" "This white elephant is a historically significant property designed by Franklin Mitchell," I informed him. "And yes, I'm keeping it. I'm also accepting a position with Hamilton Design Group that will allow me to split my time between here and New York." The news landed like a physical blow. My father's expression hardened, while my mother's eyes filled with tears. "After everything we've done to protect you from impractical decisions," my father began. "You mean after manipulating me, lying to me, and actively sabotaging my career?" I interrupted. "Those protective actions?" The confrontation that followed was inevitable but different from any previous family conflict. For the first time, I wasn't seeking their approval or trying to convince them of my position. I was simply informing them of decisions already made. "I understand you thought you were acting in my best interest," I concluded, "but your methods were controlling and dishonest. I need to establish boundaries that you've proven unwilling to respect voluntarily." They left an hour later, subdued and uncertain, our relationship fundamentally altered. Not severed, but transformed from their authority over my choices to my authority over our interactions. As difficult as the conversation had been, it left me feeling lighter, more centered. The people-pleasing reflex that had governed so much of my life had weakened its grip, replaced by a newfound confidence in my own judgment. The renovation continued with renewed vigor. Noah and I worked long days, often losing track of time as we restored original features while carefully integrating modern conveniences. Our professional partnership had developed a rhythm and mutual respect that made each project more efficient. And alongside the professional collaboration, something else was growing. I first noticed it in the way my pulse quickened when his truck pulled into the driveway each morning. In how our conversations extended long after the day's work was complete, ranging from architectural history to personal philosophies to childhood memories. "I've never met anyone who understands both the technical aspects of restoration and the emotional connection to historical spaces," Noah told me one evening as we sat on the porch steps, watching fireflies emerge in the twilight. "Most people get one or the other." "My grandmother understood both," I replied. "I think that's why she left me this place. She knew I'd see beyond its market value. Eleanor was wise that way." He hesitated, then added, "I've been meaning to tell you something. I'm not just a local handyman. I have a master's in historical preservation. I came back to help with my father's construction business after he got sick, and just stayed." The revelation shifted my understanding of his insightful suggestions and careful work. "Why didn't you mention that before? At first, you were so focused on preparing the house for sale. Then, after everything with your parents came to light, it never seemed like the right time." Our eyes met in the fading light, and the connection between us crystallized into something undeniable. Noah leaned forward, his hand gently brushing mine. "Amber, The moment was interrupted by my phone chiming with an email notification from the Historical Society. The house had been approved for preliminary historical designation, the first step toward preservation status and eligibility for restoration grants. The news called for celebration. We opened a bottle of wine and toasted to Eleanor, to historical preservation, and to new beginnings. As the evening progressed, our conversation deepened, revealing shared values and complementary dreams. When Noah finally kissed me under the stars on the wraparound porch, it felt like another piece of my new life falling perfectly into place. The final phase of renovation culminated in a community open house event organized by the Historical Society. Local residents toured the restored rooms while Diana Layton explained the architectural significance of features I'd spent months carefully preserving. My online design portfolio was prominently displayed, along with business cards for my new consulting services. To my surprise, my parents attended. They moved awkwardly through the crowded rooms, out of place among the enthusiastic locals but making an effort that spoke volumes. When my father approached me near the end of the evening, his expression was uncharacteristically humble. "The house looks remarkable," he admitted. "You've done something special here." It wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement of my competence without qualification or criticism, perhaps the closest thing to genuine pride he'd ever expressed about my chosen path. As the last guests departed, I stood on the porch in the gathering dusk, Noah's arm around my shoulders, surveying the property that had been meant as my cage but had instead become my liberation. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca, my former competitor at Wilson & Hayes. "Heard about your new arrangement with Hamilton. They're lucky to have you. Any interest in collaborating on the lakeside renovation? Could use your historical expertise." I smiled, typing a quick affirmative response. The professional bridges I'd feared burned were instead expanding into new networks of opportunity. The betrayal meant to limit my options had, paradoxically, multiplied them. 3 months that were supposed to derail my career had instead revealed a new path forward, one that integrated my professional skills, my personal heritage, and my newly discovered capacity for self-determination. My parents' manipulation had backfired completely, setting me free from patterns of obligation and approval-seeking that had constrained my choices for decades. As Noah and I walked through the quiet house, turning off lights and admiring the spaces we'd restored together, I felt a profound sense of coming home, not just to Eleanor's house, but to myself. 6 months after discovering my parents' betrayal, I stood in the converted sunroom of Eleanor's house, my house, reviewing architectural plans spread across what had once been my grandmother's garden table. Sunlight streamed through the wall of restored windows, illuminating the modern drafting equipment that now shared space with Eleanor's antique desk and my growing collection of architectural history books. My life had transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined when I'd first arrived here, resentfully sacrificing my career for what I thought was family duty. The house that was meant to distract me from professional opportunities had instead become the centerpiece of an expanded professional identity. Mitchell Design Restoration was now officially established, with a growing client list split between local historical renovation projects and consulting work for Hamilton Design Group in New York. I spent 1 week each month in the city, working on-site with the preservation team, and conducted the rest of my work from the house that had become both home and headquarters. The Westbrook Library Board approved our proposal, Noah announced, entering with 2 cups of coffee. As director of construction for my fledgling company, he managed the practical implementation of my design concepts, our complementary skills creating a seamless workflow from conception to completion. "That's the 3rd municipal project this quarter," I noted with satisfaction. The historical grant funding really sealed the deal. The renovated house had exceeded my initial vision, becoming not just a private residence but a functional workspace and occasional teaching venue. The formal parlor now served as a conference room where clients reviewed designs. The spacious kitchen hosted informal gatherings and workshops on historical restoration techniques. The detached carriage house had been converted into guest quarters for visiting colleagues or my own use during intense work periods when the main house hosted events. "The barn renovation is ahead of schedule," Noah added, referring to our most ambitious project, transforming the property's original barn into a multipurpose space for design workshops and community events. The timber frame specialist finished early. Our professional partnership had developed alongside our personal relationship, each strengthening the other. Noah's deep knowledge of historical construction methods complemented my design expertise, while our shared values about preservation created a natural foundation for both business and romance. My relationship with my parents had evolved as well, though in a more complicated direction. After the open house, they had made several attempts to re-establish our former dynamic, my mother calling with unsolicited career advice, my father questioning the financial viability of my business model. Each time, I calmly reinforced the boundaries I'd established. "I appreciate your concern," became my standard response, "but I've made my decision." Gradually, they began to accept the new reality. Our interactions became less frequent but more genuine. Without the pressure of seeking their approval, I could appreciate their positive qualities, my father's attention to detail, my mother's organizational skills, while maintaining healthy distance from their controlling tendencies. 3 months after the confrontation, they visited the house again, this time by invitation. I showed them the business I was building, introduced them to Noah as both my partner and director of construction, and explained the growing market for authentic historical restoration. "Your grandmother would be proud," my mother said quietly as we walked the property, a statement that once would have seemed manipulative but now felt like a genuine acknowledgement. "I think she knew what this place could mean for me," I replied, showing them the memorial garden I'd created using Eleanor's favorite perennials, anchored by a wrought iron bench where I often sat with her journals, still finding guidance in her words. My father, ever practical, had actually offered useful advice about business insurance and contract structures. While I remained vigilant against their old patterns of control, I'd found a way to incorporate their talents without surrendering my autonomy. The most unexpected development came through Mrs. Sullivan. After watching the house's transformation, she invited me to tea one afternoon, bringing a previously unshared letter Eleanor had given her for safekeeping. "Your grandmother wanted you to have this once you'd found your footing," the elderly woman explained. "She said you'd know when the time was right." The letter, written in Eleanor's familiar handwriting, revealed a final piece of her vision. "I've always believed this house would save you someday, Amber. Not just from others' expectations, but from your own tendency to surrender your dreams for approval. This place has witnessed 4 generations of Mitchell women making choices, some from obligation, others from conviction. I leave it to you, hoping you'll choose the latter path, creating spaces that tell your own story rather than fulfilling someone else's plotline." Eleanor's prediction had proved remarkably prescient. The house had indeed saved me, not financially or professionally in the way most would define success, but by creating the conditions for authentic choice and self-determination. The material success that followed was, in many ways, a secondary benefit. My design portfolio now featured award-winning historical renovations. The property hosted quarterly workshops that attracted preservation specialists from across the region. My consulting work with Hamilton Design Group had expanded to include other prestigious firms seeking expertise in authentic historical integration. But the true transformation was internal. The people-pleasing reflex that had governed so much of my life had been replaced by a clear-eyed assessment of my own values and boundaries. I no longer measured my worth through others' approval or sacrificed my well-being for false obligations. "You know what still amazes me?" I told Noah one evening as we sat on the porch swing, watching sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and gold. "If my parents hadn't intercepted that job offer, if they hadn't manipulated me into coming here, I never would have discovered what Eleanor intended for me. I would have continued on the same path, seeking validation through achievement rather than authenticity." "Some betrayals become blessings in disguise," he replied, his arm around my shoulders. "Not because the deception was justified, but because your response to it revealed your true strength." The property that was meant to be my cage had become my sanctuary, not just physically, but emotionally. Within these walls and across these acres, I had discovered what Eleanor had perhaps known all along, that I was capable of building not just beautiful spaces, but a beautiful life on my own terms. As autumn painted the surrounding maples in brilliant crimson and gold, I hosted a design workshop in the newly renovated barn. 20 students from regional architecture programs listened attentively as I shared the principles of integrating historical elements with modern function. "The most important lesson I've learned," I told them, gesturing to the soaring timber frame we'd painstakingly restored, "is that preservation isn't about freezing time. It's about honoring the past while creating space for new stories to unfold." Looking out at their eager faces, I saw reflections of my younger self, creative souls navigating the tension between external expectations and internal vision. In sharing my journey, I hope to ease theirs, creating ripples of authentic choice beyond my own experience. That evening, after the students had departed, I sat in Eleanor's reading chair, now my reading chair, with her journals and a sense of deep contentment. The betrayal that had initially seemed devastating had ultimately delivered me to a truer version of myself. The career setback had transformed into a career evolution. The family conflict had clarified authentic connection. Sometimes the greatest gift comes wrapped in betrayal, not because deception is ever justified, but because overcoming it reveals strengths we might otherwise never have discovered. My parents had wanted to keep me busy with what they saw as a distraction. Instead, they had inadvertently led me to my purpose. I hope my story resonates with those of you who faced similar crossroads between others' expectations and your own truth. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led to positive change? How did you navigate that difficult journey? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you found inspiration in this unexpected path to authenticity. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the most painful detours lead to exactly where we need to be.